going to turn our attention to the newspapers now. With us to review them this morning are political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, and journalist and author Gemma Forte. So welcome back to both of you. And we're delving inside the papers this hour, aren't we, Gemma? You've spotted a story inside the Mirror, this is page 2 of the Mirror, about how more people are paying for their treatment, their medical treatment.
That's right, and obviously I feel incredibly privileged, as do many, to live in a country where if something happens to you, you get this healthcare and it's immediate and it's free. I know we pay our taxes, but the model in America, doesn't bear thinking about. But we are in a situation now where the NHS is on its knees. They are operating with literally what would have been in the past called skeleton staff, and there are many reasons for this. They've obviously been blighted. They've come through a pandemic, but we have to look at what was going on before the pandemic as well. Before the pandemic, there were 100,000 vacancies, and there was a 4 million waiting list. That has crept up to 6 million. So what's happening is something's happening to someone, perhaps they need a hip replacement. Ordinarily, they would get their date for that operation and it might be in a few months' time. But now people are hearing that's not going to be happening for a year or two. People are in agony. And even if they don't have private health insurance, they are choosing to go into debt, to get a loan, to pay for instance, a hip operation would cost you £12,000. So when you look just at figures at how much these things cost, the value that hopefully, well, not hopefully because it means you're ill, but even if you have a baby or whatever it is on the NHS, the value is quite phenomenal. There are no quick fixes. It takes a long time to train nurses. People talk about there not being a magic money tree. There is not a magic nurse, doctor, porter, cleaner tree either. But the NHS is crying out for help, and it's unfair. People are paying their taxes, and then if they're paying to have a private operation, they are essentially paying twice, and that's not how it's been, but it's how it is now.
Well, yes, and Nigel, the NHS makes the front page of the Daily Telegraph as well, and a suggestion here about how the costs have really increased, but is there value for money, according to this article?
Well, no, that's the whole point, and it sort of reinforces Gemma's point a second ago. This is a report from the Civitas think tank, and what it's saying is that each household in Britain is now paying out £10,000 a year in healthcare. Obviously, that's through taxes, but that is the third highest in Europe, but outcomes are some of the worst, with 50,000 unnecessary deaths. I think, frankly, we really do have to grasp the nettle here and recognise that while the people who work in the NHS are absolutely wonderful, a structure that was designed in 1948 really isn't fit for purpose in 2022. And that's why the whole basis of the NHS needs some fundamental reform.
Well, yes, and it's something, Nigel, that Rishi Sunak is focusing on today. He's doing a speech later this morning. He's talking about some of the big emergencies facing the country, and he highlights the NHS as one of them. As far as the leadership contest goes, is that a good way of reaching the party members, do you think?
Yes, I think that the key things at the moment are obviously, number one is the cost of living crisis, and number two certainly must be how we actually get the NHS, as Gemma just put it, which is on its knees, back on its feet again. So yes, it is a good area, and it's not just a matter for the party membership. This is going to be a crucial subject for the next general election.
Well, yes, and Gemma, what do you make of this? Because here's Rishi Sunak saying this is a real problem, the NHS, and yet he and his contender, Liz Truss, have both been in government for many years in senior positions. Is that a difficult argument to make, do you think?
I think so, and the thing is, I think a lot of this has been deliberate and badly managed and quite negligent, because if you look at 2010, i.e. before the Tories got in, satisfaction levels were at their highest, and the cost per person was around the £3,500 mark, compared to, in America with the private health model, £7,500, where satisfaction levels were entirely low. In 12 years, they've managed to flip that, And it's almost like many people within that cabinet want to head towards a private model. So we have to be careful at looking at why we have got where we are, and not perhaps saying it's not fit for purpose, but perhaps it has been deliberately run down with austerity as well. It's been picked at like a carcass until there's nothing left and it can't cope. But I would certainly say that the people within it would have that view.
That's an interesting take on it. Okay, Gemma, you've spotted a story inside the Star. We've heard a fair bit about various strikes going on. Now, an exam board is proposing a strike, and it could affect when students get their results. Is that right?
I know, and it is so. I mean, teenagers have had the worst few years. I have to. So my heart goes out to them, because they've just, to be isolated at that age particularly was incredibly difficult, and the sort of repercussions socially and so on when it's all ended has been something to get our heads around. And now to have perhaps their exam results delayed is going to be really horrendous for them. But that said, nobody goes on strike for a laugh. Nobody goes on strike because they feel like it. I really don't believe that is true. I think all workers who consider strike, it is a very, very last resort. And the people who are considering striking here are people with families and with bills to pay. And obviously with inflation rising to whatever it is at the moment, I think 9%, and everybody in the public sector suffering a real terms pay cut, I understand. So it's horrendous for the kids that they have to suffer, but I also have huge sympathy for people who are genuinely panicking about how they can afford to live. And again, if you wanted to give every single public sector worker a 10% pay rise, you'd need to find 20 billion, okay? Well, we're about to pay a Brexit bill for 42 billion, it's just incredibly unfortunate. Or there's 35 billion that goes on tax avoidance. And so you can understand workers' frustrations, and it's building up, and it's like, hang on a minute, I've had enough. MPs get pay rises and so on. So there's a lot of discontent about.
Well, yeah, I mean, Nigel, how does the government approach this? Because they keep arguing that giving these, pay rises to match inflation is in itself inflationary, and it would make the matter worse. But that's no consolation for anybody who's essentially getting a cut at a time when their bills are going up. It's how do they get through this?
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And if you actually do give pay rises at or above inflation, then it just enhances inflation. However, the examiners are being offered 3%, and 3% just isn't good enough. I mean, you've got inflation, as Gemma just said, going up to 9% now, probably 11% by the end of the year. So what I'd like to see, and I think this applies both to the private and the public sector, is not pay rises of 3%. What we should be looking for is somewhere halfway at 5 or 6%. And that probably would stave off the industrial unrest that the whole country is beginning to suffer from.
Nigel, I'm going to stick with you because you want to talk about a double page spread in the Mail today about how Boris Johnson was pushed out of the top job. So what's this article saying?
Well, this is an Andrew Pierce piece, which is a kind of anatomy of how Boris fell. A lot of it we know already, but some of the interesting bits there are how much the Boris camp thought Rishi Sunak was plotting against him, and had been for some time. So it was indications like Rishi Sunak stopped turning up for private meetings with the Prime Minister, which was something that they did quite frequently. And at that point, Boris Johnson actually suspected that his Chancellor was trying to plot against him, which has turned out to be true. What I find interesting about this is that the Mail is a Liz Truss supporting paper, but if this turns out to be true, it will do Rishi Sunak's chances no good whatsoever with the Conservative Party membership, who are pretty angry that Boris Johnson was brought down the way he was. And if it turns out that Rishi Sunak had been plotting this for some time, I think that will lose him votes.
Interesting. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of column inches written about this period, aren't there? And especially over the weeks ahead with the leadership contest. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. But for the moment, we're going to say goodbye. But I'll see you again in the next hour. And Nigel and Gemma, thanks very much indeed. Do stay with us. Top stories coming up next.